Right. Anthony, how are you?
Beautiful.
Excellent.
Great, thank you. How are you?
Yes, we're good, we're good. So Friday chat happening on Friday. It's quite performance because last couple of weeks has been a bit harder. So we've got a masterclass coming up pretty soon on how to get short corners. So
yes, and that's a big area of interest for many people. Because getting short corners might win you games. Also, not conceding corners might win you games. So there's two ways to look at that, of course. Getting short corners could also be how you're creating goal scoring opportunities because they go hand in hand a little bit. But you can specifically get in the circle to get a corner, or your corner can come from a B option if you're trying to score a field goal.
So is this a different strategy? I would say.
You got a different.
Is this a different strategy?
It can be
scoring or getting a short corner.
It can be, and for some teams in some situations, it is a different strategy. Because if you have a good corner unit, then to have your team set up to get corners is a good idea. Right? But if you don't have a good corner unit, then you might change that to be more orientated towards trying to get a field goal because that's your more likely scoring opportunity. So it really, and that's the other advantage of penalty corners is building pressure on your position. And it doesn't matter the level, that applies at all levels, is you're building pressure. And the other thing is, of course, is you're maintaining the ball. You have the ball for longer when you've got corners. But it's how you do it is the key to it. And what's the best way to get a corner?
Yeah, because short corner, the other name for short corner is penalty corner. But is that penalty really an advantage?
Well, I think the lower level you go down, then the less advantage it is, right? Because the skills required to execute at a good level are quite difficult, and you have to do a lot of practice to get them right. So it's not necessarily a good thing, although it is still about building pressure, and everyone knows it's a pressure situation. So
and
in kids hockey,
short 7 against 5.
That's right. Kids hockey, penalty corners are a disaster. They just don't work, right? It's amusing because you get a penalty corner and all the parents go, yay, and you're thinking, man, last thing I want because it doesn't work. So, yeah. So there is some balance in it, right? If you've got Hendricks flicking, well, okay, let's go get corners, because, well, he's pretty good. And at the Olympics, what was he, 4 and 10 he'd score? That's not too bad. And if you think about a positive outcome getting in the circle, you pretty much go a third, right? So a third of the balls that get in the 23-meter line will get in the circle. A third of the ones that get in the circle will give you an opportunity. A third of those will be a goal. And that's a rough guideline for good success rate. When you think that, it's not very high, is it?
Indeed. So when you work with your teams, are you going to work on, I know how that team defend, how the opposition is going to defend, and this is the strategy that I'd like to put in place for your guys to follow, or your guys or your girls to follow and get the short corner, or?
Yeah, there's a couple of ways to approach that. There's a basic pattern or patterns that you'll have your team run, and basic formations that you might run to get into the circle that'll give you some opportunity to either get corners and or score field goals. When you come to play an individual team, you'll look at weaknesses and or strengths of that team. You might want to avoid the strengths, but then focus on how you're going to attack and take advantage of those weaknesses. That's a logical thing to do at any level, really. And if that weakness is a central defender, then that's clearly an area you're going to focus on to attack. But if that one's a left side defender, that weakness, you'll attack there. So the nature of that means if you're going to attack the left side defender, you're probably going to attack wider and therefore more likely to get corners and field goal scoring opportunities because of the areas you're going to be attacking the circle in. That makes sense?
Yeah,
So
if you're attacking the side of the circle, you're attacking the baseline rather than front on. So you're going to have
That's
less
right.
scoring opportunities or less clear-cut ones. So more often you're going to search for a foot.
Correct. A corner of some description.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the nature of where you've identified a weakness. And so therefore it's where you're more likely to be going with your attack.
So is there a specific area that you think it's is easier to get penalty corners or short corners in the deep? Is there?
It's yes and no. If you attack the top of the circle, then there is a lot more pressure on defenders. Because defenders at all levels are told you defend the middle of the circle, right? You stand in the middle of the circle. Kids are told stand in the middle there because that's where the goal is. That's kind of the nature of what happens. But it's much more difficult to play in there, and the defenders have to be more proactive in there because of where the ball is. So in some ways, it's easier for them to make mistakes there when they're under a little bit more pressure in there. So you could argue that going to the top of the circle, it's easier to get corners. But when you go in the back line, people don't understand how to defend there very well, and so therefore they rush a lot on the back line. They feel they have to do more and be proactive. And so therefore you got more chance of an error there.
You also get a lot of backhand defending on the baseline, especially if you're coming in from as a right side forward. Not a lot of defenders
Unnecessary.
At low level come in on the forehand. They often come in on the backhand, basically opening up half the circle.
Yeah, so it's an error in decision making, right, and how you do it, and therefore you open yourself up to a corner quite easily.
Yeah.
And the other thing that happens there with that sort of thing is it becomes a little bit more agricultural in its nature. So you might have penalty strokes that occur in that situation. Now, it's probably rare, but it is one of those things that becomes a live possibility when people are trying to make tackles in that situation in a poor way or in a poor position.
So they seem to give a bit more penalty strokes that they used to.
They do, yes. Yeah, and that's a deliberate decision by them to rule out foul play. But foul play is such a judgment thing, an individual judgment thing. There's not really a specific objective measure as to what that is, but what they try to say is they want to reward skill, right? So where they see skill of a player, but what does that mean? What is skill of a player? All they're really talking about is individual dribbling, which is skill, absolutely. But there's a whole range of skills that they don't do anything about that are, defenders are pretty good at stopping. Even when I was playing, I did it as well, because I was a defender when I played. So I would stop skilled players in whatever way I could. The mighty Shabazz played when I was playing, and blimey, he was magical. And the only really way you could stop him was with physicality.
So that was going to be my point. You might let the ball go, but not the player when you're a defender.
It's an old principle. Yeah, man or ball, not both. That's right. And that applies. But
Depends a bit where you are.
Yeah. With Shabazz, he was that good that you really, any defensive principles you worked with other players didn't work with him. And so you had to come up with something else. There weren't many options, let me tell you.
So were you getting this way? So did they know where they're pushing on this to get short corners or
yeah?
Score feed?
Well, Shabazz in his day had Wasim Feroz outside him, and they were field goal specialists. Tahir Zaman inside right. And field goals. They had a good corner, but the way they played was to get field goals, and everything they did was about getting field goals. And then if they happen to get a corner, well, okay, they'll accept it, but that was about all. Where if you played the Dutch with, Bovelander, well, they would do everything to get a corner. Or Taco van der Hornet was a good corner exponent back in the same time as Shabazz was playing. It was about getting a corner because they were really good at corners.
So there was
We played.
that tradition in the Netherlands with short corners then, because
That's right.
Bram Lohman as well was a short corner guy, wasn't he?
Yeah, but he was the crappiest player ever to have played the game, and he would run on and flick the corner. So he was one of the reasons they changed the rules, right? So I played both Pakistan and Holland at the Olympics in '92, and Shabazz got away from me once, and they won 1-0. It's just what happens, And then the Dutch, blimey, we were 2-0 up. They get 4 corners and get 4 goals. We lost 4-2. What do you do?
Because they got Take Takema as well, that even showed his sticks on Dutch TV and how the stick was rolling. So a little bit, kind of pushing the rules a little bit so that he gets more ball on his stick.
Yeah, so there's a bunch of things that have happened over the years, with the sticks had a real banana bow in them, and the ball was traveling very fast, so they straightened the sticks up a bit so there's a maximum bow you could have. Some of them were really bendy, so bendy that the players on the field couldn't actually push the ball properly and couldn't trap the ball properly because it was so bad. But what they used to do was they'd change their sticks, right? They get a new stick on a corner, so they stopped that as well. So, so the sticks are straighter than they used to be because they used to have a big banana bend in them. And, the Pakistani flickers, any of them that were any good had this bow like you wouldn't believe. But they were crap field players because of it.
So is this the way to do? Is getting the PC is also a way to compensate for slightly less skilled forwards, or?
It is one of the ways you can compensate, because to get a PC from a pure skill point of view, you can practice kind of one thing and get a PC quite regularly. And so you can do it that way. And that's certainly a reasonable strategy to have in a game. Again, that applies at any level. And so if you set up your team and you say, I want this player on the ball, in the circle, we'll give them the ball in this circumstance, and they're going to get the ball and do this flash little left to right and put it on a foot. Great, it might work 50% of the time, but they might get the ball 10 times. You got 5 corners. It's pretty good.
I mean, it depends what outcomes you're looking for in the circle and where in the circle you are. If you're in the shoulders of the circle, maybe you're looking more for a penalty corner. If you're top of the D, you'd probably be looking for a shot on goal. And it's about how you can create those opportunities.
Yes, but the overall principle in the circle, when you get in the circle, is you're looking for a result.
Yeah.
And the minimum result is you keep the ball. Right? So a long corner is keeping the ball.
I mean, I guess result 1 is a goal, result 2 is a corner, result 3 is a long corner.
Result 1 is a goal, result 2 is a stroke, result 3 is a penalty corner. Right?
Yeah.
All of them are good results, but the bare minimum is to keep the ball, whether the ball comes out of the circle and you keep it, or whether you get a long corner. You can't necessarily control how to get a long corner. That's a little bit of randomness in that. So that's really a fortune, if you like. But certainly passing the ball out and keeping it is that similar result, shall we say. So, but then you can, depending on your team, go in with a specific purpose of getting a corner. So therefore, your priority would be result 1, penalty corner, which will end up in a goal.
Yeah. And I guess it depends on the situation. If you're a lone striker up the top and there's no support, then you're looking for the corner more often. If there's 4 or 5 players, maybe you're looking for the goal. So it depends on what the player sees at that moment, so they know what they're looking for.
Yeah, lone striker 1-on-1 with the defender, then you're saying to score a goal, right? Lone striker 1-on-2, you're probably looking at a corner.
Yeah.
Right? Or 1-on-3 or 1-on-4. But the 1-on-1, I'm saying every time, have a crack.
Yeah.
Every single time.
I was thinking more ball down the line, striker picks it up, runs into the circle, but is alone 1 against 3, 1 against 4, whatever. That's when they're looking to achieve a result such as a corner. That's
right. Because the worst case scenario there is they turn the ball over.
Yeah.
And there's a bunch of effort to get in a good place and you just turn the ball over meekly. That's not good enough, And so In that circumstance, it's about getting a corner, and that's important. And then you got to give them the technique and the skills on how you do that. How do you manipulate a defender to get that result? And that's quite detailed in its orientation on how you do it.
So I've got a question. If you look at the rules, so what you see more and more players, they're in the D, they see it's crowded, rather than going for the exploit and maybe lose the ball, they put the ball in the foot of a defender. Now, if you look at the rules, voluntarily putting the ball in the foot of an opponent is a foul.
Correct.
But it gets hardly ever blown. It is clear in the rule.
I believe they changed the rules where you have to gain an advantage from it. However, if it's in the circle, it's always a corner.
No. If you look in the rules, it says if you voluntarily put the ball in, you engineer a foul, basically, that should be blown against you. That's clearly expressed in the rule book.
About 15 years ago, maybe a bit more, at the Champions Trophy in Brisbane, they decided to change the interpretation at that tournament, where if you deliberately put it on someone's foot, it would not be a free hit. It would just be play on. Oh my God, that was chaos the whole tournament. It was absolutely chaos. Then what happened? Because there's this built-in expectation now for the players that if this happens, well, I've tried to eliminate, but their foot got in the way, and gee whiz, it's a corner, And the interpretation of anything like obstruction is pretty broad these days. It's pretty hard to get an obstruction ruling anywhere. And things like that, and even dangerous play, unless it's women's hockey where they look dangerous play like it's been going out of fashion. But generally, dangerous play is a lot more limited than it used to be, and lifted ball is more limited than it used to be, and all these things are more limited than it used to be. So foot is really the only real reliable option in the circle of getting a corner. Did you think about the 2 goals in the Olympic final? Both the ball was in the air for quite a bit in the circle, but the whistle wasn't blown.
Yeah, because the concept here is dangerosity.
Correct.
Is it being dangerous? Having the ball in the air is no longer a foul. Is that ball dangerous or not? Is the situation dangerous? Or can it be dangerous?
But it's only been recent that interpretation of it has been a little bit more realistic about what is dangerous and what is not, because that's individual. What I consider dangerous would be different to what you consider as dangerous, right? So for me, a ball flying 100 kilometers an hour, not dangerous, because I'm used to that. But for others, it probably is. But for top players, there's a level that they play at, but everybody's playing at the same level in the same competitions, irrespective of what it is. So that level would have a danger applied to it and what it might be. But what we teach the players here is if the ball's in the air, someone might be afraid, therefore you should not be, and you'll have an advantage. And if a defender's afraid of the ball in the air, then you get in and get the ball, and they can be out of play, and you'll just keep going.
Yeah, I guess my only issue with the ruling as it is if someone hits a ball at goal, it's going wide, and it hits a defender's foot 20 centimeters from the baseline just before it goes out, it's given as a corner. Whereas in reality, there's no advantage there gained for the defender. That ball was going out, long corner or whatever. It shouldn't be a short corner, in my opinion.
Yeah, possibly. It's pretty difficult because then you're going to bring in more judgments for the umpires, and we want less judgments for the umpires. You want more black and white decisions, right? So it's easy to say if it hits a foot in the circle, it's a corner, full stop. True. And it's easy. Everyone knows, right? Because what's happened when they got rid of the overheads, because it used to be if there was a defender anywhere near an overhead coming down, then there was a free hit always went to the defensive team. And that changed, right? To if you're the first under the ball, then you've got the right of way, which in lots of ways is correct. But now it's a whole judgment thing for umpires around who was first and what situation it is. And you look at it sometimes and shake your head and go, oh my God, what a shambles.
And also they're looking at the ball. They're not looking at the players who are 50 meters down the other end of the pitch to see who's first there.
That's right. And so you want to minimize those judgment calls for the umpire as much as you possibly can and make it really clear. So I think even though that's a negative, like you talked about there, Oliver, I think in the end, the cost of that is reasonable given the context of those decisions.
Yeah, it makes it
where you want the right decisions. Yeah, where you want the decisions right are in the circle, and you want consistency and right. So it could be wrong, but you just want it the same each time. Then you know where you stand and you can play accordingly. Yeah. And so everyone knows if it hits your foot, it's going to be a corner.
Okay, so just conscious of the time,
so
we'll stop that conversation for now. But basically, so we've got on Sunday coming up the masterclass, Oliver, is that correct?
I believe so.
And the masterclass on Sunday, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Sounds good to me.
And so we'll look at how to get PC when it's interesting to get a short corner, and all the best strategies to get them and how to exploit them. So looking forward to that masterclass. And
and also
we'll have some videos show you how to do it. Yeah, and so that'll lead you into some general attacking principles, but because they will apply when you're talking about how to get a corner. We probably don't have enough time to get through how you defend it, because that's a whole different one. But equally, when you're thinking about how you're going to create your corners, you've got to think about those situations that apply against your team and how you would defend them.
Yep. Wow. This one's attacking in the 23, so we'll have to do defending in the 23 another time.
Absolutely.
Okay, fantastic. So everyone, that conversation was recorded.
Good.
The links everywhere, down, up, wherever it needs to be, and we'll talk very soon. Bye-bye.
And I never got a result from my comment on LinkedIn.
Yes.